someday maybe I'll get a haircut and I won't look quite like a woolly mammoth and I can, get rid of this particular hat. But anyway, when I did the habits video, I kind of mentioned briefly just addiction, that word addiction, and that word addiction scares a lot of people. And it's not really a pleasant topic to talk about, but I thought I would clear some stuff up because a lot of people tend to think, I even had a professor in school that said this, everybody has an addiction. Well, that's not true. Not everybody has an addiction to the point where they're willing to kill somebody for like a bar of chocolate or something. It's like, yeah, you can have a preference for it and you can really, really like something, but that doesn't mean you have an addiction. So what is an addiction and what are the stages of that whole process? So let's say you have a prescription for something from the doctor, or you have a bottle of aspirin. Let's just use a bottle of aspirin because it's easy. So there's use, misuse, abuse, and dependency, or what we call addiction. So use is to use it as according to label directions, right? So on a bottle of aspirin, it usually says like take 2 every 4 hours, right? And keep away from children, which is a key point. So take 2 every 4 hours. So that's use. You're using it as it was intended. You're using it according to label directions. So here comes a giant Huey helicopter. Misuse is when you take it off label directions but before abuse. So misuse is more along the lines of taking 3 every 4 hours or something because you have a really bad headache because the big helicopters keep going overhead and just making your ears thump. So that's not a Huey. That's a Coast Guard helicopter. So I don't know how well you can hear me. We'll wait for him to go by. So misuse, like I said, is when you take it off label directions. You take it, like 3 every 4 hours, or because you have a really bad headache, but you don't, it's not a pattern. You just do it like the one-off kind of thing. Abuse is when you take 3 every 2 hours because you want to, or because you're intentionally misusing it, so you're abusing it. So you're taking more than directed, you're taking it for you're taking it for a purpose other than what was intended. So if you were taking aspirin over here, let's say it's Excedrin. We'll use Excedrin because it has caffeine in it. Let's say you're using Excedrin and you take it according to label directions, that's use. Misuse is when you take more than directed or more frequently than directed. Abuse is when you would be taking it for a reason other than getting rid of a headache. So it's got caffeine in it. Say you wake up in the morning and you don't have a headache, but you're kind of half asleep and you don't drink coffee or you don't do anything with caffeine, drinking it. So you decide, I'm going to take me like 3 Excedrin to wake myself up. So that's misuse. I mean, that's abuse. So, and that becomes a pattern. So you do that every day. And so you're abusing this drug, which eventually is going to cause problems with your liver and all this other stuff. So this makes more sense. The abuse part makes more sense with a harder drug than Excedrin. And then there's addiction or dependency or addiction. It's dependency in some circles, or we just cut to the chase and call it addiction. Addiction, again, is a word that's tossed around a lot that people really don't know the definition of addiction because they think they have an addiction to something, but they don't really. You can have a physical dependency or a mental dependency or both. So a physical dependency is like when, let's say you're abusing, let's say you're abusing Excedrin. And then one day your doctor says you need to stop doing that because you're killing your liver. It's like, okay, so you quit taking it, and then that caffeine that you're not getting anymore, you just go through this caffeine withdrawal. Your body's like, oh, I have a really bad headache now. And whatever else symptoms you might have, which might be sleeplessness or restlessness or, irritability or whatever your issues are. So, but once you get past that, you're fine. You're not jonesing for this, I gotta have my Excedrin. So it's your body is going through that withdrawal. Once it's out of your system, for something like Excedrin and caffeine, it's like, a few days or a week or whatever, and you're done. Again, I'm not using hard drugs. I'm not using anything complicated right now. I want to make this as easy as possible. So, because Excedrin and caffeine and things like that are stuff that most people use to some degree. Not everybody does hard drugs or drink or anything like that. So again, so you get past that, so your physical dependency is gone. It's out of your system. You're not like thinking, okay, I can't wait to have my next hit of Excedrin. When it, you know, it's not that way. So then a mental addiction to something, an emotional mental addiction to something, is when you are craving that mentally. You've got to have it, and you got to have it now, and you'll do anything to get that. And that's where that definition kind of blurs for most people with addiction. Is they think everybody who's addicted to something is jonesing all the time. And technically speaking, addiction is craving. So your body can be physically dependent on something like the Excedrin and the caffeine, but once it's out of your system, you're not jonesing for it. But the mental addiction part is the part that we visualize as addiction. These people are addicted to this. They're twitching and snorting, and they're looking for things, and they're killing people for this drug or that drug or the other drug or whatever. And their craving is the biggest clue to whether or not there's an addiction. The obsessive seeking for whatever it is, I should say compulsive seeking for whatever it is, and then the moment of reward, whatever the addiction is, and then the cycle starts over again, because you're compulsively seeking the drug. Can be a behavior, which is a drug to your brain, because it's all neurotransmitter stuff that we won't get into. But let's just say repetitive behaviors and repetitive use of something does alter the brain chemistry and the neural pathways for the reward and happiness areas of the brain. So I won't get all, anatomical on you, but let's just say it does actually alter the brain. So it can be altered back, it can be rewired, but it takes a lot of dedication and time and practice. So craving, continued use of whatever the behavior or the chemical is, regardless of consequences. Let's say let's say you use something. Oh, here, let's use this one. It's a behavior. A lot of people don't think of this one. Gambling, or internet use, or phone use, technology use. Everybody hears about pornography use and all that kind of stuff, so we're not going to go there, but all of this kind of stuff can be addictive. So let's just use gambling. So you have continued use of this behavior, gambling. That's lottery tickets or going to the casinos or whatever. Continued use, regardless of the consequences, negative consequences. You have financial impacts, you have social impacts with your people, your family or your friends or whatever. You go into debt, but you keep doing it. You keep doing it regardless of that. And people go, well, it's just a willpower thing. It's not a willpower thing. Once you cross the line from abuse, misuse and abuse, once you cross that line into dependency or addiction, it's no longer in your control. It's now you've rewired the brain, and the brain is only seeking the one thing that makes it happy, and that's whatever that behavior is. So the trick is to get into some therapy and or some kind of counseling where you can actually identify why you're doing these things. And here comes a big truck. Bye, big truck. Why you're doing these things and how to stop doing these things. And I'm not going to go into that because there's too complicated to go into right now. But if you think you have some kind of addiction, or if you have a misuse or abuse that you're afraid is going to become an addiction, talk to your doctor, talk to a therapist, talk to somebody, because things are not always as they seem. On the outside, people think, oh, well, they look just fine. They're not addicted to anything. How often do you hear about somebody that says, you know, this guy went into rehab? It's like, what do you mean he went into rehab? He's fine. What are you talking about? Well, he was a functional drunk or a functional meth user, or I don't know if there is one, a functional something user, but you just didn't know it because they can cover it. One thing people don't understand also is when you hit in that misuse and abuse area, abuse can be drinking. People think, well, I'm not alcoholic. Well, if you have over a certain number of drinks in one sitting, or if you're fine all week and you don't drink all week, but over the weekend you just binge drinking is also addiction. It's also an issue. It's also something that needs to stop if you want to continue with your life, because eventually it's going to catch up to you. One note of caution, people who do have alcohol, I'm specifically talking about alcohol right now, but people who do have alcohol an alcoholic in their family, and they think, oh, we're going to just lock him up in a room where there's no alcohol and we're going to keep him from drinking and he'll be fine. Well, you got to be careful because alcohol is very touchy. If you do that, if your alcoholic family member is to the point where he is so dependent on it, he needs it to live, if you withdraw that from him, you will kill him or her. You will kill them because by that point, their body has become so dependent on it, they need to be weaned off of it in a detox place. So don't mess with it. If you think somebody is addicted to something, especially alcohol, get professional help because doing it yourself it can be dangerous. And a lot of times people will get off of like, you know, what is that, heroin or any kind of injectables like that. They get off of it, they're clean for a while, and then they go back to it. They relapse and go back to it. But they go back to it at the same dose that they left, and it kills them because it's out of their system now. But they hit this tolerance level where they need more and more and more, which is true of any addiction. Is you hit a tolerance level where pretty soon that's not cutting it anymore. You're not getting that same buzz or that same high from this amount, so you up it a little bit and up it some more and up it some more. And that works even for gambling or any of the other behavioral addictions. You're not getting the buzz just blowing $100. Now you got to blow $500 and $1,000, and then pretty soon it's way up there. You just take more and more chances, more and more risks. So it's not a pleasant thing to be addicted to something, or to be even to be abusing something. You're not quite did the addiction part yet, but there's still time to get off of it. But like I said, if you or somebody that you know is on that line, don't just jump in and try to do an intervention without some kind of professional help, because you could kill them. It won't be pretty either, because it's just dangerous. It's just dangerous. So. But if you're still down here in the misuse or abuse area, you can still do it. You can still cross that, before you cross that line into dependency, where you have a physical dependence and an emotional, mental dependence. So, yeah, anyway. Oh, and one other thing, since I'm on the topic. It's kind of on topic, but it's kind of not on topic. But I wanted to point out that a lot of times parents, in their well-meaning ways, if somebody mentions something to them, like, I'm worried about your son. I noticed that he's been, social behaviors have changed. Like he's more withdrawn at school, or he's not, turning in his homework like he was, or he's hanging around different people, and no, he's fine. And so let's say it's a teacher that's telling a parent this, and the teacher's saying, I'm kind of concerned that he might be into drugs. You might want to talk to him about it. So the parent would go, oh no, my son would never do anything like that. How many times do you hear people say things like that? My son would or my child, or my whoever, husband, wife, would never do anything like that. Never do anything like that. Well, one thing I do want to point out is if you have a habit of telling your child, or having your child around when you say that, my child would never do anything like that. Or you're telling your kid something similar to that about how you know that they'll never do anything like that. It's important for kids to know what you would do if they did something like that. Because in the off chance that they do something like that, they need to know what will happen. Because let's say Junior over here, he's 11 or 12, and he's been, you know, nipping off Dad's brandy bottle in the closet back there. But he hasn't told anybody, and he's not abusing it. He's not addicted to it, but he's tempting and playing and all this kind of stuff. And over here, somebody's going, oh no, my son would never do that. Junior's over here going, well, I've done that, you know, and she just doesn't know. If Junior wants to fess up, he doesn't know what's going to happen if he does. But if Mom and Dad have told Junior what would happen if he does that and fesses up, he needs to know. It's like, okay, so my son, I don't think my son would do something like that, but if he ever did, I hope he would feel comfortable enough to come to me and tell me, and we could talk about it and figure out why he decided that this would be the best path for him to go. Instead of saying, yeah, if I ever find out he's doing that, I'm going to beat his butt. Well, that's not helpful. He's never going to come to you then. Because if kids think that they're never going to, that the parents, their standards are up here, but they've broken those standards, they're just going to bury it deeper and deeper and deeper so that Mom and Dad never find out. And sometimes they need to find out so they can help the kid, right? Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense, because it's an important thing for kids to know that it's safe to come and talk to Mom and Dad. Or if Mom and Dad aren't safe, that it's safe to come and talk to some adult who can help them. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. And the ducks are whacking at me over there. So anyway, yeah, that was it. Really simplified version of use, misuse, abuse, and dependency or addiction. And one way you can look at dependency and addiction is dependency is more of like a physical dependency without the mental aspect, and addiction is where you have the craving and the mental, you know, compulsive seeking of that thing, whatever that thing is. And then the 3-second reward of whatever that is, and then you're back into the cycle of compulsively seeking that thing. So anyway, I'll stop bugging you for the moment. I'll, you know, show you around here for a second, and you can see the nice pond and the geese. There's a whole flock. It's a family, actually, of Canada geese right over here. It's Mom and a Dad and a bunch of their adolescent little goslings, actually. They look like adults, but they're still little. You can still see little baby fuzz on them. So yeah, I'll show you those guys in just a second. But anyway, that was about it for the addiction thing. So come here, I'll show you the little geese right over here. Come on. There's the little family of Canada geese. Aren't they cute? The little ones right there in these little guys right here in the front, those are the little babies. The Mom and Dad are over there, the bigger ones. You can't really tell who's bigger at the moment, but when they were coming out of the water, you could see who was bigger. So aren't they cute? So yeah, there's over there on that bank next to that goose, there's a turtle parked himself over there. And a little ducky got in the water. Isn't it pretty here? It's pretty. I needed to be outside today before it gets to be 1,000 degrees. So anyway, yeah, that was it. That's it for today. Until I talk to you again, take it easy and I'll talk to you later.